We need to talk about race. Why are people protesting? Why are people angry? Slavery ended 150 years ago.
You so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans are the biblical Israelites.
Don't care. All they want to do is be ghetto.
Organize, sit down, reason and talk. Greetings and welcome to another WhatsApp reflection, where I add my views and comments to the post that you've sent me. The title of this video is Proximity. I'll be speaking about the relationship between black and white people, where proximity has been a 24-hour consideration since the 15th century, when Europeans first started to come to Africa en masse. This closeness in relationship, especially in the West, has resulted in white culture and white society changing the Africans. But it has also resulted in those transported Africans changing European culture, where the dominant system is intent on pushing a narrative of lazy, social welfare scrounging black people. The closeness in relationship between blacks and whites has resulted in some white people having an intimate understanding of some of the stresses that black people live under. In this video, I'll be celebrating those white people who are standing up. As much as it is a challenge for them within their own circles and their own families, they are standing up and letting people know that this is not right. As they say, you've got to give credit where credit is due.
Research suggests the huge surge in arrests from increased drug enforcement was due more to budget incentives than to actual increases in drug use. So what was the result? An explosion of our prison population. In 25 years, the U.S. prison population went from 350,000 to over 2.3 million. The United States now has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. We imprison a higher percentage of our black population than South Africa ever did during apartheid. Data shows that the increased prison population was driven primarily by changes in sentencing policy. There was no visible connection between higher incarceration rates and higher violent crime rates. If you are a drug felon, you are barred from public housing. You are ineligible for food stamps. You're forced to check the box on employment applications marking yourself as a convicted felon. A criminal record has been shown to reduce the likelihood of getting a callback or job offer by as much as 50%. The negative impact of a criminal record for an African American job applicant is twice as large as for a white applicant. In 2006, 1 in 106 white men was behind bars. For black men, it was 1 in 14. For black men between the age of 20 and 35, the age where families are built, it's 1 in 9.
You so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans are the biblical Israelites, according to the curses of Deuteronomy 28. What I want to go into today is show that Christ does have a color and that Christ is, according to the Bible, a black man. He is not a white man, as the Christian church teaches and has deceived the whole world to follow after the image that the Bible calls the image of the beast. But he is indeed a black man. Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. They, Judah, are black unto the ground, and the cry of Jerusalem is gone up. I had to learn this myself, but the word Jew comes from the word Judah. And the white people in Israel right now, claiming to be the Jews, say they are Jewish. Ish, the suffix ish, means of or pertaining to, similar to. They wish they were the Jews, but they know that they are not the real Jews. God knew that in the end times, my people, the powers that be, would come up with a white image and that they would convince the entire world that he is the image of Christ when he is not. But I'm going to start at verse 14. Revelation chapter 1, verse 14. It says, his head, in other words, the hair on his head and his hairs, his beard, were white. So Christ was fully gray. He was white-headed. And then it gives you the texture, like wool. There's only one nationality of people on the face of the earth that have woolly hair.
What's your name?
Oh, yeah, that's me.
It is you. So you're out of prison.
Yes.
And you're comfortably shopping in Cub Foods. As if you didn't do anything.
I wouldn't call it comfortably. I'd just say getting necessities or helping.
I don't think you should have that right. I don't even think you should be out on bail.
I can understand.
I mean, how does it feel?
I'm sorry you feel that way.
No, you're not sorry. Like, you're literally outside here comfortably as if you didn't kill that man. Did you think that people weren't going to recognize you? Honestly, did you? You don't have the right to be here. You killed somebody in cold blood. You do not have the right to be here.
I understand. I'll get my stuff paid for.
No, we don't want you to get your stuff. We want you to be locked up. You're honestly in Cub Foods comfortably shopping. Out of prison. Like, do you feel any remorse for what you did? Do you?
Ma'am, I'm just going to grab my stuff.
This is the officer who was let out of jail today for shooting George Floyd. Or, I'm sorry, suffocating him. You're not going to be able to comfortably go around Minnesota like this. I pulled up the picture. I knew it was you. It's just like, he was there when they were killing him. And it's just like, this is crazy that you're here just thinking everything's okay. I mean, you don't want to apologize. You don't want to say anything. Like, no. Because this video is going to be on the internet. Yeah, he has the nerve to literally come outside thinking that we don't know what he looks like. How dare you? You're not going to be able to comfortably live in Minnesota after this, or anywhere. And you will be going back to jail. Trust. Trust. Yeah, he bailed out. How'd you get the money? How'd you get the money? And you're lucky that they don't have your address. You're lucky that they don't have your address. Hi. This is one of the police officers that was involved in killing George Floyd. He was out on bail today, and he's over here comfortably shopping in Cub Foods as if.
This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. This week, a federal court ordered Johnson & Johnson to pay more than $2 billion to a group of women who developed ovarian cancer after using talcum powder contaminated with asbestos. According to internal memos, Johnson & Johnson knew that asbestos may be in its talc products for at least half a century, 50 years. But as concern grew, Johnson & Johnson targeted its ad campaigns at Black, Latinx, and overweight women.
In May, the company put out a statement saying that they were going to discontinue selling their baby powder product, their talc-based baby powder product in the U.S., but continue to sell those same products abroad.
Several major British institutions and companies have apologized for their involvement with slavery. The Church of England says its links to the slave trade in the 18th and 19th century were a source of shame. New analysis by University College London found nearly 100 clergymen benefited. 10 former governors and directors of the Bank of England have also been named in that report. The bank called the trade an unacceptable part of British history and vowed not to display images of the senior figures involved. Insurance giant Lloyd's of London and pub chain Green King also made similar pledges. The firms say they'll fund projects to provide opportunities for minorities. But a regional alliance of Caribbean countries says apologies are not enough.
We have to talk about something called the psychology of cruelty.
Right. Let me just jump in. For those of you from other countries, my reading, this is where it woke me up. It was actually written in the law that they weren't human, that it was 3/5 of a person. So Dr. Anita's not just saying this. This was like written. It just shocked me when I read that. It was shocked me.
Be no issue.
Let me just pause because what you're saying, I mean, because it's so internal. I mean, it's just so part of what you know. But I'm saying, here I am. I came from another country, and when I started reading this, I mean, you're just rattling it off. It took me 20 books to go. This is real.
Looting has broken out all over the country. It has gotten so bad. Even my community is speaking out. But let's be real. It's probably because it affects the bottom line.
Abdul Saleh has never seen anything like it in his 20 years in business. Stuff that wasn't theirs, that looters stole early Saturday evening. What hurts Saleh the most is he knows many of the looters.
And I got no problem with nobody.
That's awful, but come on. $25 for Jays? That Jumpman's got a gut like Kim Jong-un. So who's looting who, Saleh? Clearly, there are a lot of people who own small businesses and are feeling the pain. Why are they doing this? Ye pagalpan kya hai? What does this solve? And I understand that frustration. Especially when you think about the countries that we come from. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Egypt, Libya, Palestine, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Vietnam, Cambodia, China, Japan, Laos, the Philippines. Depending on when you immigrated, I know this, you came to this country for order and stability. We don't want it to be as fucked up as back home. That's why we're all in our living rooms and we're like, ye pagalpan kya hai? Ye log kya kar rahe hain? Why can't they just follow the laws? But imagine if you lived in a country where the color of your skin got you killed for driving, jogging, sleeping, yelling, parking, babysitting, sitting in a van, selling CDs, selling cigarettes, opening the door, walking at night, wearing a hoodie at night, holding a toy gun, lying on the ground, being homeless, being in a dark stairwell, holding a cell phone, having a broken taillight, exercising horses, having a bottle of pills, shopping at Walmart, holding a BB gun at Walmart, holding a phone in your own backyard, eating ice cream in your own house, and shopping. You would say that is a lawless country. Who the fuck is running the show? Al-Shabaab?
Overall, African Americans and white Americans use drugs at roughly the same rate, but the imprisonment rate of African Americans for drug charges is almost 6 times that of whites. It may be true that there isn't explicit racism in our legal system anymore, but it doesn't mean justice is blind. A law in Georgia permitted prosecutors to seek life imprisonment for a second drug offense. Over the period of the study, this law was used against 1% of white second-time offenders and 16% of black second-time offenders. As a result, 98% of prisoners serving life sentences under this law were black. Study: African American youth in the U.S. make up 16% of all youth, but 28% of all juvenile arrests, 35% of youth sent to adult court instead of juvenile court, and 58% of youth admitted to adult state prison. Study: blacks on the New Jersey Turnpike make up 15% of all drivers, but 42% of all stops by police and 73% of all arrests. Among all drivers stopped, white drivers were 2 times more likely than black drivers to be carrying drugs. Study: Volusia County, Florida. 5% of drivers were black or Latino, but 80% of drivers stopped were black or Latino. Study: Oakland, California. Black drivers are twice as likely as white drivers to be stopped and 3 times more likely to be searched. In Minneapolis, Philando Castile had been pulled over 49 times in 13 years, mostly for minor infractions. The 49th time he was pulled over, he was shot by the officer while sitting inside his car. He'd been pulled over for a broken taillight. Chuck Colson's organization, Prison Fellowship, recently organized a manifesto that was signed by evangelical leaders asserting that our over-reliance on incarceration fails to make us safer or restore the people and communities who have been harmed. Unconscious bias seeps into schools, too, as white teachers often assume black students are less intelligent than they actually are. A gifted student usually has to be recommended by a teacher to move to a gifted track. When a teacher is black, an equally gifted white and black student have comparable chances of being recommended. When the teacher is white, the black student's odds of being recommended are cut in half. It affects black students every day. So where are we? The average black household has 1/10 the wealth of the average white household. This didn't happen by accident. It happened by policy. We, the majority culture, told them where they could live and where they couldn't. Then we moved most of the jobs to the places we told them they couldn't live. When the predictable explosion of unemployment and poverty resulted in a predictable increase in drug use and crime, we criminalized the problem. We built $19 billion of new jails and sold grenade launchers to the police. As a result, a white boy born in America today has a 1 in 23 chance of going to prison in his lifetime. For a black boy, it's 1 in 4. And that is why people are angry. Many people care deeply about these issues. Many have suggested solutions. Some of those have been tested, with results ranging from moderate success to abject failure. I'm not here to tell you what the right solutions are, because I don't know. I'm just here to ask you to do one thing. It is the thing that begins every journey to a solution for every problem. What am I asking you to do? Care.
You know how we've been saying that cops are the ones that are actually doing vandalism and starting the riots? Here's some proof. Boston police posted this on their Twitter account, claiming that it was the protesters that did this. Here's some close-ups. Makes the protesters look pretty bad, huh? Well, this is what the protesters caught on camera. They apparently did that with several other cars. And then they took pictures of them and posted it on Twitter and pretended that the protesters were the ones that did it. Be skeptical of all the stuff police and the media are posting about the protests.
Take this piece off here, and put it over here. And now you see, the United States is no longer in the middle of the map.
Right.
Now, I did this with a major record company in New York City, I think in 1970. And an older man stood up in the back of the room and said, "Now, Elliot, you've gone too far." I said, "What's your problem?" You can't do that with the map." I said, "Well, actually you can." He said, "No, the United States isn't in the middle of the map anymore." I said, "The United States never was in the middle of the map. You need to realize this depends on how you draw your map." And then I pointed this little fact out to him. South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland.
Even though it doesn't really look like it.
No, it is. South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland.
It's crazy.
Now, according to your social studies teachers, what is the equator? Halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole on this map would be right about here.
Right.
And that means that Iowa has a semi-tropical climate. Well, you've been in Minnesota in the wintertime.
I've been in Iowa too. It's definitely
You know that it doesn't have a tropical climate. So you have to then introduce a real version of the map of the world. I think this is the one.
That's very good.
The Peters projection map. The sizes on this map are right. The shapes are distorted.
Wow.
Look at Greenland on this map. Right there. See it?
Yeah, it's really tiny.
See how small that is?
Right.
Look at it on the Mercator projection.
So why do they do that? I don't understand.
Why? Because the Pope commissioned Mercator to make a map that shows the spread of Christianity. So all the countries in which there are predominantly white people are larger than those in the southern part of the world.
The highest award given to British officials who work abroad is the Order of St. Michael and St. George. This consists of a star with a little enamelled painting, and the painting shows the angel St. Michael standing on the neck of the devil, and the devil is a black man. This image is very similar to one that we've become familiar with. A policeman kneeling on George Floyd's neck as he says, "I can't breathe." And the idea of standing or kneeling on the neck of a black man is deeply embedded in these notions of dominance, of white people over black people, the dominance of Western nations over other countries. Now, one of the recipients of this award was a man called Sir Evelyn Baring. Sir Evelyn Baring was the grandfather of someone called Mary Wakefield. Mary Wakefield is the wife of Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson's chief advisor, a man who has done more to cover up the record of current events than anyone else in this government. Sir Evelyn Baring was governor of Kenya when Kenya was a colonial possession of the United Kingdoms. And while he was there in the 1950s, he instituted a system of concentration camps, which even his own Attorney General compared to those run by the Nazis. He drove into these concentration camps and fortified villages. Almost the entire population of the Kikuyu people, then numbering over 1 million people. Huge numbers died, some of them of starvation and disease, many beaten to death, burnt to death, tortured to death. Repeatedly, men were castrated. In some camps, almost the entire population of children died.
And until the Mau Mau are destroyed, the innocent too must suffer.
It was Evelyn Baring who oversaw the creation of this system.
Sir Evelyn Baring, upon whom rests the main responsibility of the campaign.
We are making progress in that struggle, and we are all confident that in the end we will succeed.
He also directly authorised the beating to death of people within those camps. When Labour MPs asked inconvenient questions about this, on one particular occasion when 11 men were beaten to death, he told the Colonial Secretary to tell the MPs that they had died from drinking contaminated water. Before Britain left Kenya, there was an order sent down, implemented by Special Branch, to conduct what they called a thorough purge of the archives. They burnt crate after crate of documents. One of the orders instructed that if there were too many documents to burn, they should be packed into weighted crates, taken as far from the coast as practicable, and dumped into very deep water without currents. They erased not only the evidence of what happened in Kenya, but much of what happened in Malaya.
The British troops in Malaya, slowly but steadily, are smashing the Reds' reign of terror, and they'll keep at it till the job's done.
In Yemen, where Britain fought its dirty war, in Aden.
We're going to be extremely firm and extremely mean. If anyone starts any trouble, they'll just get the head blown off. They'll get the message in time, you know.
We remember all this in the context of Boris Johnson telling us that to pull down statues is to lie about our history. The entire history that we are told about British imperialism is a lie. We, as a nation, have a greater level of pride in our empire than any other European nation. People look back with nostalgia to Britain's imperial past. That's impossible to understand unless we understand the massive fabric of lies, of deletions, which has airbrushed the colonial atrocities practiced everywhere we went. Imperialism has long been justified through the notion that the white man had a duty to civilize the so-called other races. Racism is an ideology, and to a very large extent it was created by British theorists. You can take it back to the late 18th century and the work of a physician called Charles White, who was one of the people who formalized this idea that there's a sort of ladder of life, and the white man is at the top of that ladder, and below the white man on the ladder is the white woman, and below that were people with dark skin. That ideology remains with us today. It's that ideology which led to the policeman kneeling on the neck of George Floyd, institutional racism, to systemic racism, and a huge part of that ideology began here in the United Kingdom to justify our seizure of other people's resources and other people's lives. These relationships continue by other means, through our trade relationships today, which are often highly coercive, enforced by offshore tribunals of corporate lawyers, basically forcing countries to give up their natural resources, enforced by international debt, and what we see is a net drain of wealth from the poor nations into the rich nations. This wealth is not just being taken from other people in the world today, it's also being taken from future generations. The capacity of the earth to support us is being wrecked by those who are burning through the Earth's resources as quickly as possible, who are destroying our life support systems. Environmental destruction, imperialism, racism, these are intimately connected. They all mesh together as part of a global system of injustice. It's not just the bad stuff in history that they don't want us to see. It's also the good stuff. The massive role of the slave revolts and rebellions, of the slaves themselves and the ex-slaves, who through their advocacy managed to generate a huge amount of outrage about the slave trade and what it involved. Similarly, the history of resistance and rebellion within these shores, a huge range of people's movements amongst the working classes, amongst the middle classes, trying to create a better, juster, more democratic nation, often hundreds of years before their visions came to fruition. And by learning from that history, as well as by learning from our history of atrocities, these two hidden histories, we can begin to understand where we stand, why we are where we are, and how, from that position, we can start to build a better world.
The man on the face of the $20 bill is the same man who once offered up to 325 times that amount for the return of a runaway enslaved person, including extra bonuses for every 100 lashes inflicted upon that man. He was a master planter who fertilized American soil with Native American bodies and hydrated southern cotton fields with the blood and sweat of free black labor. Such an icon of white supremacy was he that nearly 200 years after launching the violent displacement of 100,000 non-white bodies, a piece of paper with his face on it was all the authorization they needed to suffocate a man to death while the world watched them do it. Big Floyd was murdered by police outside of a grocery store. See, my uncles also operate grocery stores, liquor stores, mini-marts, and so on. That whole generation followed a pretty simple formula. You put your heads down, make your money, send your kids to good schools. See, what that actually meant was, put your heads down and don't think about why this formula works out for you but doesn't always work out for everyone else. Why you get to own property in this neighborhood but the people who live here can't. Why liquor stores like yours are in every corner but fresh produce and after-school programs are pretty hard to come by. And definitely don't consider a centuries-long history in this nation that includes slavery, legalized segregation, a made-up war on drugs, criminalization of black and brown bodies, immunity for police officers when they commit crimes, and that's just to name a few. So what do? We put our heads down. We turned those Jacksons into Benjamins and those Benjamins into Benzes. We became well-educated, well-to-do, and, well, accommodating. We complied with the status quo that keeps telling us that we're almost there, but just not quite them enough until we shed every last remnant of our heritage. Except, of course, for the ones that can be exploited for a diversity initiative or sold for profit. And in the meantime, we got all our music, culture, fashion, sports heroes from a community of people without ever having to reckon with the fact that we have been complicit in the violence against their very existence all along. We kept our heads down, now the joke's on us. We abandoned our homelands and everything we knew to escape poverty, to escape violent conditions, to escape systemic oppression. And this whole time, we remained silent while we watched those very same things happen to a group of people who are just slightly different from ourselves. We no longer have time to keep our heads down. Not now, not ever again. Listen to and learn from black voices. Donate your time and your money to black-led organizations and black causes. Learn and vote in your federal and local elections. And hey, Bollywood, we don't want to hear any of this Black Lives Matter stuff from you unless you're also dealing with the casteism, colorism, sexism, Hindu supremacy, and support of state-sanctioned violence that's running around freely in your own industry right now. Black Lives Matter.
Something is wrong here. Dead giveaway.